to Hillcrest Church Video. We hope this message will help you grow.
My name is Tim. If we haven't met before, and if we've met, my name remains Tim. I get the privilege of serving on staff here. I get to teach Scripture with y'all. Today we're going to start in the book of Exodus is where we're going to begin. So if you want to flip there in your Bibles, it's the second book in the Bible, Genesis, Exodus. We're going to be in chapter 6 is where we'll be beginning this morning. And the book of Exodus, just by way of reminder, it's the story of when God's people, the Israelites, they're enslaved. Actually, genocide is being carried out against their male children, and they cry out of their slavery, and God delivers them. God rescues them out of slavery, takes them through the wilderness to this promised land. And if you've seen, there's movies about it. Charlton Heston's 10 Commandments, the old school movie, or more in the 90s, the animated Prince of Egypt. Anybody Prince of Egypt fan? Yes, some. Okay, there you are. Yes. So this is the story. I mean, you've seen it. You know, the parting of the Red Sea, 10 Commandments. This is the story that the book of Exodus is talking about. And I want to read this section with you now from chapter 6. And I just want to remind for the people who went through this and their descendants for centuries and centuries, they looked back on this moment as a defining moment about what they believed God was like. Like over and over again, for the Israelites, the people who wrote these stories down and held on to them, this question of what is God like, they would say, this is what the heart of God is like. And so let's read from Exodus 6. I'm going to begin in verse 6 with you now. Therefore, say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. And I will bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. God says to his people, says, I will bring you out. I will free you. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. This is what they look back. What is God like? This is what God is like. And the story of the Exodus is the story of God doing this in history. God, these Egyptians that enslaved the Israelites, and God does these mighty acts of judgment, and it culminates, and it gets so bad. Eventually, God allows the angel of death loose, and the people of Israel are protected as they put the blood of the lamb over their doorways. And Pharaoh says, get out of here. I don't want you as my slaves anymore. And so they say, we are free. And they go, and they get to the edge of the Red Sea. And then Pharaoh and his army says, actually, I changed my mind. I'm going to hunt you down. And so God parts away through the Red Sea. The people of God go through the Red Sea on dry land. And as Pharaoh and his army run into the Red Sea after them, God closes up the sea on top of them and destroys the enemies of his people. And then the people, they go out into the wilderness. They meet God at a mountain, and God gives them his commandments, his law, his way of walking with him, his way of living on a mountain. God feeds them in the wilderness. God gives them water in the wilderness. There's even this moment when God reveals his glory to Moses on this mountain. I want you to see what I'm like in all my glory. And then eventually, after 40 years, God leads them to this land that he promised them. And these people who experience this and their descendants over and over again, they'd say, what is God like? God is like the Exodus. That's what God looks like. God's heart towards us was most fully revealed in the Exodus. This rescuing, acting on our behalf, leading us through the wilderness. That is God's heart towards us. What is God like? I mean, it's a question that we still ask and wrestle with today. What is God like? We use the word God. A lot of different people, will say the word God, and sometimes there's this assumption that we're talking about the same thing. But actually, the reality is, 100 people could be using the word God, and they have 100 different visions of what that even means in their mind. 100 different definitions of what is God like. For you this morning, what is God like? What is the character of God? And I don't mean what is the right answer. Sometimes in religious communities, we can have this idea that I need to know the right answer and give what's the correct, fill in the blank. But I what I really want to ask you to reflect on is, when you're by yourself and you're thinking about the worries of your life or the things that really weigh on your heart, and you think about God and the way He is towards you in your gut, what do you think God is like? Does He have a frown, just a perpetual, sense of disappointment over you? What is God like towards you? Is He arrogant? Is He upset all the time? Is He too busy with really important things to be bothered with your little things? When you, in your heart of hearts, what do you think God is like towards you? When the people of Israel, the people who experienced these things, they looked back and they said, we believe God, His heart, it looks like the Exodus. Some of us, maybe you're here and you're a skeptic about faith. You're like, I don't even know if I believe in God. Well, then my question for you would be, what do you believe ultimate reality is like? What's ultimate reality like? Because when we talk about, when believers talk about God, we're describing what we think ultimate reality is like. What is ultimate reality? Is it chaotic, random, meaningless, impersonal forces? Is that ultimate reality? When you're what do you think ultimate reality is like? For these people, they said, we believe ultimate reality is a personal God who stepped in to rescue us out of slavery. What is God like? Now, I want to take this question, what is God like, this image of the Exodus. I want you to hold on to that, because now we're going to take that and we're going to go to the book of Isaiah. We've been in this teaching series of Isaiah. We started back in the fall. We've been in it for weeks and weeks and weeks, months and months and months even. And we're going to pick up today in chapter 40. And if you've missed weeks, I'd encourage you, when you have some time, we have all our messages online. Go back and listen to some of those. You're doing the dishes, you're on a jog, you're driving to work, driving to school. Listen to some of those, because this whole, the book of Isaiah all fits together. And the more you have the different pieces, the more it's going to fit together as we go on. And so today, I just want to take a moment and kind of remind us where we're at in the story of the book of Isaiah. So Isaiah, the book starts off, and God says to His people, these people that he rescued out of slavery, centuries later, but it's the same people. He says to them, I want you to be a light to the nations. And what God means when He says, I want you to be a light to the nations, He means, I want you to worship me, the God who brought you out of slavery, who heard your cry of suffering and rescued you. I want you to worship me alone. And then I want you to act like me in the world. And particularly to act rightly towards the weak, the orphan, the widow, the poor, the foreigner. I want you to treat them well. So I want your worship and your ethics to be aligned with me. And when you live that way, you will be a light, so that other nations who don't know me yet would look at you and they'd say, oh my goodness, you're onto something. I want to follow this God. I want you to be a light, to draw people to myself. But God said, this is what I want you to be. But God says, actually, you're kind of being the opposite of this right now. This is a problem. We need to talk. If I'm calling you to be a light to the nations, you're kind of a dark to the nations right now. And he says, you are not treating the vulnerable well. You're oppressing them. You're taking advantage of them. You're taking advantage of the poor. You're not caring for the widow. You're taking advantage of the orphans. There's just injustice in your land. And he says, and biblically, injustice and idolatry are always tied together. Because whenever there is injustice, whenever there is wrong being done against the vulnerable, the poor, the orphan, the widow, whenever that is happening, something other than the God in whose image they are made is being worshipped. Whether power, or money, or sex, or comfort, something else is being worshiped there. And that idolatry always leads to injustice. God says, this is happening. And because you're being an anti-light to the nations, like this just cannot be, because I want to draw them to myself. And so I need to do something radical. And God says, I'm going to allow this Babylonian empire to come conquer you and take you into exile 800, 900 miles away to live in exile in Babylon. I want to get your attention. I want you to come back to me so you can live the way I've designed you to live. And so in this middle section of Isaiah that we're in now, chapters 40 through 55, it is written to these people who are in exile in Babylon. It's addressing them. And you can imagine these people in Babylon, they would have been asking questions about what is God like? They're here in exile, and they're, God, do you still remember us? God, are you always going to be upset with us? God, do you care to rescue us? Are you going to just leave us here? God, what are you like? And so this section of Isaiah that addresses them, 40 through 55, we're going to look at the very beginning of it this morning, and we're going to see that God speaks to them in their exile and says, this is my heart towards you. Whatever else you've been told, this is my heart towards you. And I want to look at this announcement of God's heart to those in exile with you now. We're going to pick up in Isaiah chapter 40, addressing these in exile. And God says to them, beginning in verse 1, Comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice of one calling, in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. So these opening words, this opening address to those in this situation of exile is double comfort. Comfort, comfort. And then the image of getting the highways ready and smoothing out the roads, the image is that God is on his way to you. Get ready. God is coming to you to bring comfort. And then later on, I want to skip down just to verse 9 now, because we get an implication of what God did when he came to visit them. And I want to look now, chapter 40, verse 9. It says, you who bring good news to Zion, go up on a high mountain. You who bring good news to Jerusalem, lift up your voice with a shout. Lift it up, do not be afraid. Say to the towns of Judah, here is your God. And so the implication is that God has visited the exiles in Babylon, but now he's coming back to the promised land, their homeland, Jerusalem and Judah. And the implication is he's set them free and he's bringing them with him. See the imagery here in verse 10. See, the sovereign Lord comes with power, and he rules with a mighty arm. This image of mighty arm, we heard it in that Exodus passage. Do you remember in Exodus 6, it said, I will redeem you with a outstretched arm. It's an image. The arm is an image of God's power at work in the world. Like because it's your right arm, you get things done in the world. And it's like it's with your arm. And it's actually the first time it occurs in the Bible is in that passage in Exodus. With your arm, you with your might and power, you rescued us out of Egypt. And now here in Isaiah 40, it's kind of a reference back to Exodus. With your arm, with your might at work in the world, you will bring us out of exile in Babylon. And then it says, see, his reward is with him and his recompense accompanies him. When a king or a warrior defeats the enemy of the people, what does the king or warrior bring back to them after the victory? The plunder, the treasure, the spoils. So the image is being painted that God, the warrior king, has come. He's come with his outstretched arm. He's defeated their enemies in Babylon. He's bringing them back home. And then we get this image of him bringing them back home in verse 11. Verse 11, it says, he tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those that have young. And so the picture here is God as this warrior king who's come. These people are in exile in Babylon. He's defeated their enemies, and he's defeated them. And now he's not just the warrior, but he's the shepherd. And he's walking back to the homeland with his flock. And it says that there's a lamb there that's legs are tired, and he picks it up, and he carries it next to his heart. And it says that there's a nursing mother who she's having to go slower. And God doesn't say, hey, hurry up. But God, this one who has acted on their behalf, slows his pace down to match hers. And God's giving this vision of these people in exile who are saying, God, what are you like? What is your heart towards us? And God says, this is my heart. This is what I'm like towards you. This is what I want to do on your behalf. And I so want us here at Hillcrest to get this vision. Like, I want our kids to have this vision when they imagine, what is God like towards me? God is like the warrior. He fights against the things that would enslave you. And when your legs get tired, he picks you up and he carries you on his chest where you can hear his heartbeat. Like, I want our kids to have that vision in their hearts. I want our young moms and our young dads, our parents of young kids, I want them to have this vision. God is the God who acts with might against the things that enslave you. And because you're a nursing mom, you have to go slower. Because of the age of your kids, life slows down. God isn't a God who says, hey, hurry up, keep up with me. God is a God who says, let me match my pace with yours. I'm just going to walk alongside you, slow as it takes. This is the God that we worship. And this is the vision that he gives his people while they're in exile and while they're asking these questions. And he references over and over again, he references the Exodus. Like, you notice, like when his people are in exile in Babylon, and he's trying to describe what his heart towards them, what he wants to do for them, he's using this Exodus imagery, right? Remember how I acted with an outstretched arm in the past? I'm going to do it again for you. Remember how I went and found you in a foreign land and I brought you home? I'm going to do it again for you. There will be a new Exodus. Just as I was to your ancestors, I will be for you. It's this new Exodus that is being described here in Isaiah. Now, what's interesting, as you go on through the chapters of Isaiah, these chapters 40 through 55, who are addressed to these in exile, it's describing this new Exodus. It's interesting because what we see is there's actually two rescuers. There's two senses that this new Exodus takes place. So the first, and Christian talked about this last week, the first rescuer is Cyrus the Persian. And Christian did a great job of unpacking this last week. But it's this idea that the first rescue is about just literally, physically getting the people physically from Babylon back to their homeland. Right? And God says, there's going to be this totally unexpected thing. I'm going to use Cyrus the Persian, this pagan king, and I'm going to use him to physically get you back to your homeland. The people go in exile in like 587 BC, and then 538, 537, Cyrus comes in, and he conquers the Babylonians, and he physically allows the people to go home. But what we see in Isaiah is we get this sense that the people need not only to get physically home, but they need to get spiritually home. Because the whole problem in the first place was that they were worshiping all sorts of things other than the God who rescued them, and that was leading them to all kinds of injustice. And so God says, not only do I need to physically get you back to your homeland, I need to spiritually get you back to me, get you understanding who I am and what my heart is, that you can live it out. And so in the book of Isaiah, we get this second figure described called the servant. And there's 4 songs about the servant in this section of Isaiah, describing the servant and how the servant will lead this spiritual new exodus back to God. And so what happens, I want to just show a timeline here. What happens is, You see this box that says exile in Babylon right after 600? That's that time that we've been talking about, from about 587 when they go to exile in Babylon to 537 when they physically return home. That's kind of that first part of the new Exodus. They physically return home. But even after that, even after they come back to the Promised Land, there's this lingering question: when will the spiritual new Exodus occur? When will the servant appear and spiritually bring us back to God? And that question hangs out there for 5 centuries. When will the new Exodus be complete? When will the servant appear? When will we be made fully right with God? And it just hangs out there. And it's still hanging out there in the time when Jesus of Nazareth appears on the scene. And I want to just invite us to think about what the life of Jesus looked like. Read it through the lens of people who are awaiting a new Exodus. Read it through the lens of people who are awaiting a servant who will lead them in a new Exodus, a spiritual Exodus back to God. Think about how Jesus shapes his life. For example, before Jesus kind of starts his public work, there's this other prophetic figure by the name of John the Baptist. And he's out in the desert, and he says, "I am the voice calling in the wilderness. Prepare the way for the Lord," which is a quote from Isaiah 40 that we just read. And so John the Baptist is in the desert saying, guess what? It's finally happening. God is coming to you to complete the new Exodus. Get ready. He's on his way. And then Jesus shows up, and Jesus, he goes to where John is, in the Jordan River, and he goes down into the water and out of the water into the wilderness for 40 days. When you hear about someone going through the water into the wilderness for 40 of something, what does that remind you of? The Exodus. And then Jesus, he does things like at one time, he's out in the Sea of Galilee, and his friends are in this boat with him. And it's at night, and the storm stirs up. And the disciples are so afraid, and Jesus is asleep, and they're like, "Jesus, this storm is going to kill us. We are going to drown. Aren't you going to do anything about it?" And it says Jesus wakes up, and he stands, and he tells the sea, he tells the storm, he tells the wind, "Be quiet." And the sea is completely still. And then the boat arrives on shore, and this man runs up to them. And it says that he has this legion of demons inside of him. And Jesus says, "Leave this man alone." And we're told the demons go out into this herd of pigs. And then the herd of pigs runs into the sea and is drowned. Now, where have you seen someone tell the sea what to do and then drowned the enemies of the people in it? The Red Sea, the Exodus. Jesus, he goes out into the wilderness, and the people are hungry. And what does he do with bread and fish in the wilderness? He feeds them. Where have you seen people being fed in the wilderness? Manna, the Exodus, the wilderness wanderings. Or he goes up on a mountaintop, and on the mountaintop, he brings his people to him, and from the mountaintop, he instructs them on the way to walk with God. What does that remind you of? Sinai. God's giving of his commandments on the mountain. Or another time, he goes up on another mountain, and he brings just a couple of his disciples up on top of the mountain, and it says he's transfigured, and like the glory of God rests on him. Where have we seen God's glory being seen on a mountaintop? Moses sees God's glory. Or Jesus leads his followers to Jerusalem, and they show up in Jerusalem at what festival at the end of Jesus' life? Passover. And what festival does Passover celebrate? Or what events does Passover celebrate? The Exodus. This is when he brings his people to Jerusalem, and he gets there. And then he's getting together with his close friends, and they're celebrating the Passover meal, the very meal that commemorates when God brought his people out of slavery in Egypt. Like this people, these Jewish people have celebrated this meal for century after century after century, saying, "Remember when God brought us out of slavery in Egypt. Remember when God brought us out of slavery in Egypt. Remember when God brought us out of slavery in Egypt." This is the meal, and Jesus is sitting with his friends eating this meal, and he looks around at them and he says, "You know this meal our people have celebrated for centuries? It's actually about me. It's fulfilled in my body being broken, my blood being poured out." And then the next day, Jesus is executed outside the city walls during the Passover festival. The entire shape of his life is saying the long-awaited new Exodus, the suffering servant who comes to lead the people back to God, has arrived in Jesus of Nazareth. And when you look back at Isaiah, what you see is that Isaiah actually pointed to this. Isaiah saw this ahead of time. I want you to just flip over from Isaiah 40 over to the right to 53 here. So Jesus' life, it points to, it evokes that this new Exodus has finally arrived. And in Isaiah 53, God gives him an image of what this new Exodus would finally look like and how the servant would bring it about. Now, this is just really, I find this very fascinating, so hang with me for just a second, okay? So remember in, we read that first Exodus passage, and it talked about God with his outstretched arm redeeming the people, right? Because your arm is your might, your power at work in the world. God, you acted with power to bring us out of slavery. And then remember in chapter 40, we read again that God says, you in exile, I will bring you out with my mighty arm. Again, God's power at work in the world. I will bring you back to my promised land. Now, in chapter 53, it's talking about this new Exodus and how God will spiritually bring people back to himself. And listen to the language it uses. Chapter 53, verse 1, it says, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? What it's saying here is, it's like, do you want to know what my arm really looks like? You want to know when I really act with power on behalf of my people? Do you want to know what it looks like? Let me tell you, let me reveal my arm to you. Let me tell you what it looks like. And then it goes on. And this just, if you want to understand the heart of God, you've got to begin to wrap your mind around this mystery, because it goes on to describe a righteous man who is suffering for others. Verse 4, surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. It's this incredible statement of God saying, do you want to know when I am really at work to rescue you? When I am doing my mighty thing to pull you out of slavery. Do you want to know what that looks like? It looks like my servant suffering on your behalf, bearing your pain, carrying your suffering. Because what we find out in the life of Jesus, what we find out is that ultimately God realizes that at the end of the day, the ultimate enemy isn't Egypt. It isn't Babylon. There are things deeper than other empires that enslave people, things inside of us that enslave us. Deep guilt and shame and even fear of death. And that Jesus came to take those things upon himself, to take our guilt, to take our shame, to break the power of self-centeredness that can get a hold of our hearts, of selfishness, and to even take on our experience of death to bring us out the other side. The servant came to bear those things for us, that he could lead us back to right relationship with God. And so for the ancient Israelites, you'd say, what is God like? What is God like? And they'd say, God is the God who hears our cry when we're oppressed. God is the God who brings us out, redeems us, and brings us into freedom. Brings us and makes us a people for himself. And for those in exile in Babylon, what is God like? And when they were worried and they were asking that question, God says, I am the warrior shepherd. I fight against the things that enslave you, and I tenderly carry you next to my heart and slowly lead you home. That's what I'm like. And for the followers of Jesus, all this gets pulled together. And God says, I am the God who comes to rescue you, to set you free. I am the warrior shepherd who carries you and walks your pace. But my rescue, it doesn't come from attacking these foreign powers. But my rescue comes by carrying your pain, your suffering, your guilt, your shame, carrying it myself to the cross on your behalf. And it's this is the mystery of God, and we can spend our entire lives reflecting on this, that ultimately, and God says, do you want to know what my arm looks like? It's not this image of arrogance. It's not this image of violence against others. It's not this image of wagging a finger at us. God says, do you want to see what my might at work in the world on your behalf looks like? Look in the face of Jesus on the cross for you. That is my might at work in the world on your behalf. And so I want us to reflect on this. I want us to get this into us. And I guess just a couple things I would say as we reflect on this. One, if you're a person that you're skeptical about faith, and you're not sure what you think about religious belief. What I find a lot of times is when folks are in that place, they deeply affirm that things like sacrificial love is the best way to live. That looking out for the vulnerable, the orphan, the weak, the widow, that standing up for them is the best way to act towards others. That suffering out of loyalty for others, to suffer for someone else's sake, like that is a good and noble and right thing to do. They'll affirm those things. But then at the same time, turn around and say, but ultimate reality is actually meaningless, chaotic, random, impersonal forces. And I would just say, what if these ways of you affirming, you say this is the best way to live? What if you've realized this is the best way to live and the right way to live because it actually reflects ultimate reality? That the heart of ultimate reality is sacrificial love. That is ultimate reality. What if that is why you've discovered these things about your life? And that is when we read these scriptures of preserved through history, what these scriptures are saying and what we say when we follow Jesus is not that we've mastered this and we live it out perfectly and we totally embody it. No, we fall all the time. But what we say is we believe that ultimate reality is a person, a triune God who reveals his heart in sacrificial love, and that these scriptures bear witness in history and with words to us that this is what God is like in his heart towards us. That's what this is the story about. And so today, for those of us who are followers of Jesus, we're going to come to the communion table and celebrate communion. And as we celebrate communion, this is the meal that remembers and rehearses and celebrates Jesus' body broken on our behalf and his blood shed on behalf. Like, this is the ultimate act of God's arm revealed as sacrificial love for us. And so when we come to this table, we are again saying, yes, God, I believe this is your heart for me and for your world. And this is what I'd like to invite us to do this morning. As you come forward to partake in communion, this is what I find. That a lot of times, this idea that this is God's heart towards us, it'll be in our heads, but it won't be in our hearts. That we'll be able to say the words, yeah, I know that God shows his heart towards me in the cross, and God's the tender shepherd that lays his life down on my behalf. Like, we'll say that, we'll know the right answers, but kind of like in our guts, in our bones, in our souls, we don't feel that. And that we're maybe quite suspicious that God harbors different attitudes towards us. When we're alone, when we're by ourselves, we really do wonder, like, what does God actually think of me? Does God even see me? Does God give a rip about me? And we really wonder, and maybe we've had pain or disappointment in our life. Is God just always trying to teach me a lesson? Maybe we've got a lot of anxiety in our life. Like, God, does he even care about these things? And I think maybe a lot of times we have the right answer in our head, but in our hearts, we really wonder. And I guess I would invite you this morning as you come to the table, as you come and take the bread and take the cup, what would it look like to let God do some re-imaging, some spiritual surgery, to take those maybe events or situations in your life and to say, I want to give you a different vision of my heart towards you with this thing in particular. God spoke to those people in exile. He says, while you're in exile, I want to tell you, there's all sorts of other messages you might have in your head, all sorts of other visions you might have in your head about what I'm like towards you. I want to tell you right now what I'm like towards you. I desire to bring you home, to fight against the things that enslave you, and to carry you next to me. That is what I want you to remember. That is what I want to capture your imagination. And for followers of Jesus, we come to the cross. And God says, do you want to know what my might and power working in your behalf looks like? It looks like me carrying your pain and bearing your suffering. This morning, as you come, in those deep places in your heart, would you let God speak to you about who he is, how he sees you? Abba, Father, and Messiah Jesus, Creator Spirit, we do pray to you now. And God, you are the God who over and over again in my life and in the lives of others, you come and you say, I get these images of who you are in my mind, and we get these images in our mind, and over again you say to us, no, I'm not quite like that. Let me again tell you what I'm like. And God, I pray for us this morning, if there's places that we just have ideas about you that aren't true and aren't helpful and aren't reflective of your real heart, that you would this morning, you gently come and just say, that's not what I'm like towards you. And that you would again show us, you would say, this is my heart towards you. This is what I want to do in your life for you, and this is how I see you, and this is who I am towards you, and that you would reveal that again through your Son, Jesus. Would you do this work by your Spirit even this morning? In your name, amen.
Thanks for connecting with Hillcrest Church. For more info on this and other sermons, visit us online at hcbellingham.com or join us at 9 or 11 a.m. any Sunday morning, 1400 Larrabee Ave, Bellingham, Washington.